"Remove the Duchess's gloves," the Duke of Blackmere ordered. Before the guards could touch Eleanor, a pearl rolled from the evidence case, stopped beneath the Queen's chair, and began to tick. The entire court fell silent. "Do not touch it," Eleanor said. Her husband ignored her warning. He ordered the guards to search her sleeves, while his mother opened a velvet case bearing Eleanor's initials. 3 pearls, stolen from the Queen's necklace, gleamed inside. A murmur of condemnation swept through the gallery. Eleanor looked toward her 8-year-old daughter, Rose, who stood crying beside the Dowager Duchess. Nathaniel unfolded a confinement order. "Until your innocence is established, you will lose access to your workshop and our child. You have not weighed the pearls. You have not examined my records. I have seen enough." "No," Eleanor said. "You have chosen enough." The guard beneath the Queen's chair reached for the ticking pearl. Eleanor tore one hand free, seized a silver tray, and knocked it away. The pearl struck a column and split open. A poisoned needle sprang across the marble. Then the 2 pearls inside Eleanor's case began ticking too. Both pearls had begun to tick. "Clear the gallery," Eleanor ordered. For one suspended moment, nobody moved. She was still a prisoner, still held by a guard, still publicly accused of robbing the Queen. Yet, she was also the only person in the room who understood what lay inside the velvet case. The Queen broke the paralysis. "Obey her." Courtiers surged toward the doors. Chairs scraped across marble as attendants pulled the royal household back from the dais. Nathaniel lifted the velvet case, but Eleanor struck it from his hands with the silver tray. "Do not carry them together." The case landed on the carpet without overturning. Nathaniel stared at her. "What are they?" "Release mechanisms. The first contained a poisoned needle. Until I examine the others, assume they were designed to kill anyone who touched them." Augusta drew Rose closer. "She manufactured them. Of course she knows how they work." Eleanor turned upon her. "Then why did you place my daughter beside them?" Augusta's expression hardened, but she released Rose's shoulder. Nathaniel motioned to a guard. "Take Rose away." "No," Eleanor said, "not with anyone chosen by your mother. You are in no position to issue terms." "I am in precisely that position. You removed my authority, surrendered my keys, and nearly allowed a poisoned device to reach the Queen. You will not decide who guards our daughter until we know who entered my workshop." The words struck him harder than anger would have done. Rose stood between them, trembling. The Queen looked toward Eleanor's maid. "The child remains with Miss Finch under my protection." Only then did Eleanor lower the tray. Sir Thomas Vale, the elderly royal goldsmith, entered, carrying a leather tool chest. He had trained beside Eleanor's father and had known her since she was a girl sorting flawed stones at a workbench too tall for her. He knelt near the first broken pearl. "Do not touch the needle," Eleanor warned. "The green residue may be arsenical copper or a botanical compound." Thomas adjusted a magnifying lens over one eye. "This casing was turned on a precision lathe. My workshop contains one capable of producing it." "And who possesses the keys?" Eleanor looked at Nathaniel. "I did, until my husband ordered them taken from me 3 weeks ago." A murmur moved through the remaining officials. Nathaniel's shoulders stiffened. "You were exhausted. My mother offered to supervise the household while you completed the restoration of the Queen's necklace." "I was not exhausted. I objected when Lady Augusta removed 2 craftsmen without consulting me. They had been stealing silver. So, she claimed, you dismissed them before I could inspect the inventory." Thomas glanced up. "Were they the only men trained to operate the small lathe?" "Yes." Nathaniel said nothing. Eleanor had spent 11 years making Blackmere's workshop profitable when she entered the marriage. Its accounts showed mounting losses and abandoned commissions. She introduced numbered molds, recorded the exact weight of every stone, and rebuilt the family's reputation until the crown trusted Blackmere hands with royal jewels. Nathaniel had praised those achievements in private. In public, he had presented them as evidence of his own disciplined management. Now the system she created had been used to frame her. Thomas opened his tool chest and removed a pair of long steel tongs. "The mechanisms must be separated," he said. Eleanor studied the 2 ticking pearls. One vibrated at shorter intervals, the other remained almost still. "Move the quieter one first," she instructed. "Set it inside the bronze document box and close the lid without turning it." Thomas followed her directions. Nothing happened. The faster pearl shifted against the silk. Eleanor crouched several feet away, watching the false seam. Bring me beeswax and a shallow bowl of sand. Nathaniel stepped toward her. You are still under confinement. She looked up at him. If you attempt to remove me before these devices are secured, you may explain the next death to the king. The Queen's chamberlain hurried to obtain the materials. Nathaniel lowered his voice. Eleanor, this is not the time to challenge me. You challenged me when you chose accusation over examination. I am merely establishing the boundary you failed to respect. For the first time, he looked ashamed. It was not enough. The wax arrived. Eleanor pressed it onto the end of Thomas's longest clamp, then used the softened surface to grip the moving pearl, without applying pressure to its casing. Sand, she said. Thomas steadied the bowl while she lowered the pearl into it. The ticking stopped. Everyone waited. A thin needle pierced the wax where Eleanor's finger would have been. Thomas exhaled. You have just prevented a second poisoning. No, I have delayed it. She pointed to a tiny opening beneath the needle. No liquid emerged. This device was empty. The chamberlain frowned. Then it was harmless. It was a demonstration. Eleanor looked toward the first needle lying upon the marble. A device meant to murder the Queen would have been placed directly upon her necklace, not hidden among evidence likely to be handled by guards. Someone wanted the poison discovered. Someone wanted the court frightened. And someone had needed Eleanor alive long enough to be blamed for it. Thomas examined the empty chamber. There are scratches inside, he said. Something was removed. Eleanor leaned closer, but did not touch it. Not removed, never inserted. This pearl was built to prove that my workshop created the mechanism. The Queen descended from the dais. Can you prove otherwise? If my ledgers remain intact. Augusta's cane struck the floor again. The ledgers of an accused thief cannot be trusted. They can be compared with the Crown's records, Eleanor said. Every royal pearl was weighed twice, once by me and once by Sir Thomas. Thomas nodded. The figures should match. Nathaniel's gaze shifted toward the case containing the 3 supposed stolen pearls. Then weigh them. At last, the scale Eleanor had requested was brought into the gallery. Thomas placed the first genuine-looking pearl upon one pan and added brass weights to the other. He repeated the process twice, then opened Eleanor's ledger. His brow furrowed. This pearl does not match any removed from the Queen's necklace. Augusta answered too quickly. Because Eleanor altered her records. Thomas turned several pages. She would have needed to alter mine as well. Silence settled across the gallery. The Queen looked at Nathaniel. On whose testimony was your wife accused? He hesitated. My mother found the case. And who possessed the key to Lady Eleanor's workshop? Nathaniel's face slowly changed. Before he could answer, the western doors opened and a palace messenger stumbled inside. Blood marked one cuff of his uniform. Your Majesty, he gasped. The Queen's necklace has been found. Eleanor rose. Where? Around the throat of a woman discovered unconscious in the Blackmere carriage. The messenger swallowed. The woman is wearing the Duchess's cloak, and every pearl on the necklace has been hollowed out. Nathaniel reached the carriage court before Eleanor. He ran down the palace steps with 2 guards behind him, his formal coat unfastened and his face stripped of its usual composure. Eleanor followed beside Sir Thomas, while the Queen's chamberlain carried the bronze box containing the final false pearl. Rain had begun to darken the paving stones. The Blackmere carriage stood beneath the archway, one door hanging open. A woman lay across the rear seat, beneath Eleanor's grey travelling cloak. The Queen's ceremonial necklace was fastened around her throat. Do not touch her or the pearls, Eleanor said. A young palace physician was already leaning into the carriage. He withdrew his hand. She is breathing, but barely. Eleanor recognized the woman when a guard lifted the cloak from her face. Mary Cole. Nathaniel looked at her. You know her? She polished settings in my workshop. Mary's dark hair had fallen across her cheek. A bruise marked her temple, and grey dust clung to her fingertips. She was dismissed for stealing silver, Nathaniel said. She was accused of stealing silver. There is a difference. Augusta arrived beneath a servant's umbrella. I warned you that dishonest workers would bring ruin upon this family, she said. Now one of them has stolen the Queen's necklace while wearing Eleanor's cloak. Eleanor examined the carriage without entering it. Her travelling cloak had disappeared from Blackmere House the previous evening. Augusta had claimed a laundress had taken it for cleaning. Now it covered an unconscious former employee inside the family carriage. completing a scene almost too perfect to question. Almost. Eleanor pointed to Mary's shoes. The soles are dry. Nathaniel glanced at the rain-slicked courtyard. She may have entered the carriage before the rain began. The rain began before the necklace was reported missing. Augusta's fingers tightened around her cane. The palace physician reached toward the necklace clasp. "Wait," Eleanor said. "Look behind her left ear." A faint red puncture marked Mary's skin. The physician bent closer. "A needle wound." "Ah, someone drugged her before arranging this." "Or she injured herself, handling one of your devices," Augusta replied. Eleanor ignored her. "Sir Thomas, examine the pearls without removing the necklace." Thomas fitted his lens into place and leaned into the carriage. He studied one pearl, then another. "Each has been cut along the same hidden seam. Are the chambers filled?" "I cannot tell without opening them." "Then leave them closed." Nathaniel stepped closer. "We need the necklace returned to the Queen. We need Mary alive. She is accused of stealing from the crown. She is also the only witness who may know who brought her here." Nathaniel looked toward the palace guards awaiting his command. Eleanor saw the old impulse in him, the desire to restore order with a decisive instruction, whether or not he understood what he was ordering. She moved between him and the carriage. "If you remove that necklace carelessly, you may drive 12 poison needles into her throat." The physician recoiled. Nathaniel's gaze dropped to the pearls. "What do you propose?" It was the first question he had asked her since the accusation began. "Cut the ribbon beneath the clasp. Do not disturb the individual settings." Thomas produced a pair of shears. With the physician supporting Mary's head, he cut through the velvet backing. The necklace loosened and was lifted away without touching the pearls. Mary released a shallow breath. Eleanor instructed the guards to carry her inside on the carriage cushion rather than move her onto a rigid board. As they did, something slid from beneath Mary's hand and landed on the carriage floor. A small wooden bobbin. Black thread remained wound around its center. Eleanor knew it at once. Each workbench in her jewel room had a bobbin tied beneath it for securing unfinished necklaces. She had ordered the wood painted by station, red for cutting, blue for polishing, black for mechanical repair. Only one bench used black, the precision lathe. She reached for the bobbin but stopped before touching it. "Thomas, place it in an empty evidence envelope. Record where it was found." Augusta gave an impatient sigh. "It is a piece of thread. It is a piece of my workshop, found beneath the hand of a drugged woman. And it proves Mary Cole entered your workshop." "No, it proves the person who arranged this scene did." Nathaniel examined the carriage door. A streak of grey dust marked the interior handle. The same dust is on Mary's fingers. Eleanor rubbed a little between two pieces of clean paper. "Graphite." Thomas looked toward the wooden bobbin. "The lathe gears are lubricated with graphite." Nathaniel's expression sharpened. For a moment, Eleanor believed he finally understood. Then, Augusta spoke. "Mary operated that lathe before her dismissal. The graphite and bobbin merely confirm she returned to steal from us." Nathaniel's hesitation vanished beneath the explanation offered to him. "It is possible," he said. Eleanor looked at her husband in disbelief. "You saw her dry shoes. You saw the wound behind her ear. How many contradictions must appear before you stop calling your mother's version possible?" His mouth tightened. "I will not condemn her without proof. You condemned me with less." The words silenced him. Mary was carried into a small retiring room near the courtyard. The physician examined her pupils and breathing while Eleanor remained near the door. Augusta attempted to follow, but Eleanor blocked her path. "No member of the Blackmere household enters until Mary wakes." Augusta's eyes narrowed. "You remain the Duchess of Blackmere only because my son has not yet decided otherwise. And you control my household only because he made the mistake of trusting you with my keys." Nathaniel stepped between them. "My mother will return to Blackmere House and secure the workshop." "No." The answer came so quickly that even he seemed startled. Eleanor removed the ivory workshop key from the evidence table, where a guard had placed it. "This key has not left my possession today, yet someone entered the workshop. Therefore another key exists. If Lady Augusta returns first, anything remaining there may disappear." Augusta's face became perfectly still. Eleanor turned to the chamberlain. "Seal the workshop in the Queen's name. Send guards who have never served Blackmere. Let Sir Thomas accompany them and inventory the lathe, moulds, drills, poisons, and unfinished commissions. The chamberlain looked to the Queen, who had arrived quietly at the entrance. "Do as she says," Her Majesty ordered. Augusta's authority vanished with 5 words. It was a small victory, but Eleanor felt its effect ripple through the room. Servants who had avoided looking at her now waited for her instructions. The physician asked her which compounds Mary might have encountered. Even Nathaniel remained silent when royal guards took possession of the workshop key. Mary suddenly convulsed. The physician caught her shoulders as her eyes opened. Her lips moved, but only a dry rasp emerged. Eleanor knelt beside her. "Mary, you are safe. Who brought you to the carriage?" Fear filled the woman's eyes. She looked past Eleanor toward Augusta. Then she lifted one trembling finger and pointed not at the dowager, Duchess, but at Nathaniel. "My lord," she whispered, "you gave her the keys." Nathaniel went pale. Mary struggled for another breath. The pearls were never meant for the Queen. Eleanor leaned closer. Who were they meant for? Mary's gaze shifted toward the corridor through which Rose had been taken. For the child. Across the room, Augusta's expression changed. Until that moment, she had regarded Eleanor as a disgraced wife who could be removed. Now she looked at her as the only person capable of destroying everything she had planned. Eleanor was on her feet before Mary finished speaking. "Where is Rose?" Nathaniel turned toward the corridor. "Miss Finch has her. Find them." He ordered 2 guards to search the royal nursery, but Eleanor caught the sleeve of the nearest man. "Do not call Rose's name. If someone is watching her, an alarm may force them to act." The Queen's chamberlain dispatched servants to seal every palace exit. Eleanor questioned the maid who had last seen Miss Finch. The woman remembered them being directed upstairs by a footman carrying a message marked with the Duke's seal. Nathaniel frowned. "I sent no message." "Someone expected the palace staff to obey your authority without questioning it," Eleanor said. The same authority he had used against her now concealed a threat to their daughter. Mary tried to rise from the couch. "Music room," she whispered. The physician held her down. "You must remain still." Eleanor knelt beside her again. "What is in the music room?" "The little silver bird." Rose owned a mechanical songbird with pearl eyes, a gift from Augusta on her 8th birthday. Eleanor had objected when it arrived because no maker's name appeared beneath the base. Nathaniel had dismissed her concern as discourtesy toward his mother. Now she remembered Rose carrying it into the palace that morning. Eleanor ran. The royal music room stood at the end of the eastern gallery. Its doors were closed, but a child's voice sounded faintly from within. "Mama?" Eleanor reached for the handle. A metallic click stopped her. A black thread stretched from the lower hinge to the latch. It was nearly invisible against the carved door. She stepped back. Nathaniel arrived behind her. "Rose, do not open it. My daughter is inside, and the door has been trapped." He looked down and saw the thread. Eleanor followed its path. It disappeared through a narrow opening beside the latch, then emerged beneath the door, tied around a tiny brass pin. The arrangement resembled a mechanism her father had once shown her in a stolen snuff box. When the lid opened, tension pulled a concealed needle through the lining. Only this mechanism was large enough to release something across an entire room. "Rose," Eleanor called through the door, keeping her voice steady. "Do not touch anything. Where is Miss Finch?" 10. She fell asleep. Drugged, Eleanor thought. "Are you holding the silver bird?" "Yes. Grandmamma's footman said I must wind it before the Queen came." Nathaniel closed his eyes. Eleanor heard the realization in his silence. Augusta's servants had retained access because he had placed the household under her control. "Rose, put the bird on the floor very gently." But he said, "Listen only to me now." A pause followed. Then came a faint scrape against the carpet. "I put it down. Well done. Go to the window and stand behind the blue curtain." Nathaniel reached for the sword at a guard's side. "What are you doing?" Eleanor asked. "Breaking the lock. The thread is attached to the latch. Force will pull it." "Then how do we reach her?" Eleanor studied the gap beneath the door. The thread was taut, but the brass pin lay close enough to touch with a flat instrument. She removed the stiff whalebone from the edge of her torn glove. Nathaniel stared at her. "That cannot hold the tension." "It does not need to hold it. It needs to redirect it." She slid the whalebone beneath the door and carefully lifted the thread away from the pin. Her hand shook once. Rose began to cry behind the door. Mama, I am frightened. So am I, Eleanor admitted. Nathaniel looked at her sharply. Eleanor had not intended to reveal the fear clawing beneath her ribs, but she would not teach her daughter that courage required pretending. Being frightened does not mean we stop thinking, she continued. Keep your eyes on the blue curtain. Tell me how many golden flowers you see. Rose sniffed. 1, 2, 3. Eleanor hooked the thread with the whalebone. 4, 5. The thread lifted free. Now, Eleanor said. A guard forced the door inward. Nothing discharged. Nathaniel rushed into the room, but Eleanor caught him again. The floor. Thin wires ran beneath the carpet toward the silver bird. He stopped one step before crossing them. Miss Finch lay unconscious beside the piano. Rose stood behind the curtain, both hands pressed over her mouth. Eleanor directed the guards around the edge of the room, where the bare floor revealed no wires. A footman lifted Rose and carried her out. The child threw herself into Eleanor's arms. For several seconds, Eleanor could not speak. She buried her face in Rose's hair, feeling the warm proof of her life against her cheek. Nathaniel reached toward them. Rose recoiled. The movement wounded him visibly. Eleanor held her daughter tighter. This happened because you handed our home to someone who wanted me silenced. Nathaniel glanced toward the open music room. We do not yet know. My mother arranged it. Then investigate. Sir Thomas arrived with the royal guards from Blackmere House. He carried a sealed wooden box and looked grim. Thomas returned from Blackmere House carrying a sealed evidence box. The lathe was cleaned this morning, and the poison cabinet was open. Nathaniel frowned. Eleanor alone possessed the keys. No, Thomas said. The locks were replaced 3 weeks ago. Duplicate keys were made under your written authority. I authorized no duplicates. Thomas looked toward Augusta. Your mother collected them. Nathaniel turned to her. Augusta did not deny receiving the keys. She merely said, your wife had become incapable of managing the household. Eleanor faced her husband. You gave her my workshop, my servants, and my tools. Now those tools have been used against the Queen. Nathaniel had the contradiction before him. He still chose not to act. Eleanor looked at Nathaniel. Where is your key? I never received one. Augusta's expression remained composed. Then the secretary misplaced it. A royal guard entered the music room to examine the silver bird. Minutes later, he returned holding a folded card with Nathaniel's crest stamped in black wax. The chamberlain opened it. The message instructed Miss Finch to leave Rose in the music room with the mechanical bird and await the Queen's arrival. Nathaniel stared at his own seal. Augusta immediately seized the explanation. Eleanor had access to that seal for years. She could have prepared the message before stealing the necklace. The accusation moved through the watching courtiers. A mother who endangered her own child to gain sympathy was more monstrous than a jewel thief. Eleanor felt Rose tremble against her. If that is what you intend to claim, she said, let the seal be examined. Nathaniel's secretary, Mr. Harcourt, was summoned from the council chamber. He had served Blackmere for 15 years and had witnessed Eleanor rebuild the estate accounts after the old duke's debts nearly consumed Rose's inheritance. He studied the wax through Thomas's lens. This impression was made with his Grace's private signet. Nathaniel lifted his right hand. The black onyx ring remained on his finger. Impossible. Harcourt turned the card toward the light. No, Your Grace. The flaw beneath the raven's wing is present. This came from your ring, not a copied mould. Everyone looked at Nathaniel. Eleanor remembered the previous evening at Blackmere House. Augusta had insisted upon pouring her son's wine. Nathaniel had fallen asleep in the library and remained there for nearly 2 hours before a servant carried him upstairs. His signet could have been taken, used, and replaced. Harcourt examined the black wax. This seal was made recently, he said, after the Duchess lost access to his Grace's private rooms. Nathaniel looked at his mother. Augusta stepped close to him. If you allow this inquiry to continue, the Crown will open every Blackmere record signed during your father's illness. Eleanor understood the threat. Augusta had signed documents in the late Duke's name, and Nathaniel had concealed it to protect the family. Test the seal, Eleanor said. For once, choose the truth before your name. Nathaniel carried the message to the candle. Nathaniel, do not. He held it over the flame. The wax melted first. Then, the paper burned in his hand. Eleanor watched the only evidence capable of clearing her turn to ash. You did not fail to find the truth, she said. You destroyed it. Nathaniel did not order the wax tested. He crossed to the nearest candle and held the corner of the forged message over its flame. Eleanor watched the black wax soften. "Nathaniel, do not." His eyes met hers across the small tongue of fire. Shame was visible in them, but so was something stronger. Fear. Augusta had found the one fear capable of governing him, the destruction of the Blackmere name. "If this impression was made with my private signet," he said, "then the ring was taken from my hand. No examination of the wax will identify who used it." "It will prove when it was used," Eleanor replied. "That is why your mother wants it destroyed." Augusta's voice remained low and controlled. "The card has already passed through half a dozen hands. Any test would be disputed. Harcourt can verify the formula and drag our private records before the Crown." Augusta asked her son, "Would you like the Queen's ministers examining every sealed order issued by Blackmere since your father's final illness?" Nathaniel flinched. Eleanor understood. The late Duke had spent his final years too ill to manage his estates, while Augusta signed correspondence in his name. Nathaniel had known. He had allowed the practice to remain hidden because exposing it might call old land transfers, military contracts, and parliamentary votes into question. Augusta was not merely asking him to protect her. She was reminding him that the family's authority rested upon years of convenient silence. The flame reached the wax. Eleanor moved toward him, but a guard blocked her path. "You are destroying evidence in the presence of the Queen." Nathaniel dropped the card into a brass coal pan. The paper curled inward. His crest turned liquid, blackened, and disappeared. For 11 years, Eleanor had protected his family from debts, scandal, and disgrace. She had believed that if the truth ever demanded a choice, he would finally choose her. Now she understood. Nathaniel had never doubted her because the evidence was strong. He had doubted her because sacrificing his wife cost him less than confronting his mother. Rose began to cry again. The Queen's face became cold. "Duke, you were ordered to permit an examination." Nathaniel bowed, though his voice was strained. "The message could not establish who endangered my daughter, Your Majesty. It could only spread suspicion through a household already humiliated." "No," Eleanor said. "It could establish that I did not create it." He looked at her but offered no answer. That silence changed something inside her. Until then, a small part of Eleanor had still believed that if she placed enough truth before him, he would remember the man who once trusted her judgment. But Nathaniel had not been deprived of evidence. He had burned it. The Queen ordered Rose taken to a guarded royal apartment with Miss Finch, who had begun to regain consciousness. Eleanor attempted to accompany her, but the Chamberlain stopped her at the threshold. "I am sorry, Your Grace. The accusation against you remains unresolved." "She saved the child," Thomas protested. Augusta answered before the Chamberlain could, or constructed a danger she alone could overcome. Nathaniel's face tightened, yet he did not contradict his mother. Eleanor felt Rose's fingers being pulled from hers. "Mama, I will come for you," Eleanor promised. The doors closed between them. Nathaniel then followed Augusta into a private antechamber. Eleanor could hear only fragments of their argument through the carved wooden panels. "The Queen will never trust us again, unless you act before the council does." Eleanor would not harm Rose. Then why were her tools used? When the doors opened, Nathaniel carried a fresh sheet of paper. A royal magistrate had arrived. The man placed an inkstand upon the table, and the Duke signed a sworn declaration stating that Eleanor alone possessed the knowledge required to construct the devices, that she had resisted the temporary transfer of her workshop, and that her hostility toward Augusta had intensified after losing household authority. Each statement contained a fragment of truth, arranged to create a lie. Eleanor read the declaration without touching it. "You know why I resisted the transfer. You had become suspicious of everyone around you. Because tools disappeared, records changed, and craftsmen were dismissed. You never showed me proof. You refused to look." Nathaniel's hand remained on the document. "If I do nothing, the Crown may seize Blackmere House, close the workshop, and question every servant. Rose will grow up beneath the shadow, so you will place that shadow entirely upon me. This inquiry will be private. There is no private repair for a public accusation." The magistrate sanded the Duke's signature. Under the declaration, Eleanor would be confined in a guarded apartment while the royal council determined whether she should face formal charges. Her workshop, accounts, and household correspondence would be surrendered for examination. The order, also named Augusta Temporary Custodian of Blackmere's domestic property, Eleanor stared at the final clause. You are giving her access again. She knows the household. She knows precisely which evidence must disappear. Augusta stepped beside her son. The royal guards will supervise me. The same guards who obeyed a message bearing his seal. Nathaniel hesitated. That hesitation was his last chance. Eleanor lowered her voice. If you sign the custody order for Rose, your mother will control where our daughter sleeps, who serves her meals, and which physicians attend her. After what happened in the music room, you cannot claim ignorance of the danger. Nathaniel looked toward the closed doors behind which Rose waited. Then he signed the second order. Rose will be safer at Ravenscroft, away from the palace. Ravenscroft was Augusta's secluded dower estate. Eleanor's breath caught. You are sending her into your mother's house? The estate will be guarded by men your mother employs. Enough. No, you will hear this before you take my child from me. If Rose is harmed at Ravenscroft, it will not be because you failed to understand my warning. It will be because you chose your family's reputation over her safety. Nathaniel's face went white, but he handed the order to the magistrate. The choice had been made. Guards escorted Eleanor to the west apartments. The rooms had once housed foreign prisoners awaiting royal judgment. The windows were barred, the fireplace cold, and the writing desk contained neither ink nor paper. Eleanor stood at the window as a closed carriage crossed the inner courtyard below. A blue ribbon fluttered briefly behind the glass. Rose. A second carriage followed, carrying Augusta. Eleanor pressed her palm against the bars until the iron hurt. Behind her, the door opened. Thomas entered under guard, carrying the wooden evidence box recovered from Blackmere's workshop. I was permitted 5 minutes, he said. He set the box down but did not open it. The lathe inventory was incomplete. 12 pearl casings were made, not 3. Eleanor turned from the window. Where are the others? Missing. Thomas withdrew the black wooden bobbin found beneath Mary's hand. Around its centre, concealed beneath the remaining thread, someone had scratched a sequence of numbers. Eleanor recognized them as mould measurements. Not for jewellery, for buttons. She crossed to the military coat hanging from the guard's shoulders. Its polished pearl buttons were identical in size to the measurements on the bobbin. Blackmere's workshop had recently completed ceremonial coats for the king's honour guard. The devices were never designed for a necklace, Eleanor whispered. Thomas followed her gaze. At sunset, the king would lead a procession through the palace square. 200 guards would stand shoulder to shoulder around the royal carriage, each wearing 12 pearl buttons. The 3 false pearls had been a demonstration, just as Eleanor suspected. The real mechanisms had already left her workshop disguised as part of a royal uniform. A bell sounded from the courtyard below. The king's procession would begin in 1 hour. The first trumpet sounded before Eleanor could reach the door. "Guard!" she called. "The procession must be stopped." The man outside did not answer. She struck the wooden panel with both palms. "The king's honour guard may be carrying poisoned mechanisms. Take the black bobbin to the queen." Ah. At last, the key turned. The guard who entered was young, perhaps 20, and visibly uncomfortable meeting her eyes. His ceremonial coat bore 12 pearl buttons. Each one matched the measurement scratched into the bobbin. Eleanor stepped away from him. "Remove your coat." He gripped the hilt of his sword. "Your Grace? Where was that uniform stored before it was issued?" "At Blackmere House. Your workshop completed the buttons. Remove it without pressing them." The guard looked toward Thomas, who nodded urgently. He unfastened the coat from inside and laid it on the floor. Eleanor knelt without touching the buttons. The uppermost pearl appeared flawless, but its thread holes were too narrow for the cord passing through them. The cord was ornamental. The button was held in place by a metal pin beneath the fabric. "Cut around it," Eleanor instructed. Thomas used a small knife to remove a square of cloth. The button came away with a brass cylinder fixed behind it. Along the cylinder ran 6 shallow grooves. Eleanor's father had taught her to recognize a repeating spring timer by those grooves, one groove released with every measured interval. After the 6th, the casing opened. "How long have you worn this coat?" she asked. "Since the noon inspection." "Have you heard ticking?" The guard's face changed. "I thought it was my watch." Thomas held the button near his ear. "It has stopped." Eleanor looked toward the courtyard as the second trumpet sounded. No, it has completed its count. She seized the bronze document box, swept the button inside with the edge of the black bobbin, and slammed the lid. A sharp snap came from within. Green liquid seeped through the box's seam. The young guard staggered back. Eleanor rose. Every ceremonial coat must be removed immediately. The honor guard is already in formation. Then run. The guard hurried down the corridor with Thomas, but another sentry locked the door behind them. Eleanor remained imprisoned while bells announced the king's arrival in the palace square. From the barred window, she could see the procession below. 2 perfect lines of white-coated guards framed the royal route. Sunlight flashed upon hundreds of pearl buttons. At the center of the square, the king stood in an open carriage beside Nathaniel, who had been ordered to accompany him as Lord Steward of the procession. The musicians lifted their instruments. Eleanor understood the final trigger. The buttons had not been set to open at a specific hour. Their springs had been wound during inspection and held in place by a thin internal catch. The sustained vibration of drums and marching feet would loosen the catch simultaneously. "Stop the music!" she shouted through the bars. Her voice vanished beneath the first roll of drums. The honor guard stepped forward. 1 pace, 2. On the third, a soldier near the northern gate grabbed his chest. Another dropped his rifle. Then an entire row convulsed as needles drove through the fabric beneath their buttons. Men collapsed in both directions. The crowd screamed. The king's horses reared against their harnesses. Nathaniel jumped from the carriage and caught one bridle, but the driver had already fallen. The uncontrolled team pulled the carriage toward the line of poisoned guards. Eleanor gripped the bars. "Turn the carriage toward the fountain," she whispered, though Nathaniel could not hear her. "Use the water to slow them." He pulled the left rein instead. The horses veered toward the narrow eastern arch, where the crowd was too dense to escape. Then Mary Cole's warning returned to Eleanor. The pearls were never meant for the queen, nor were they meant only to kill the guards. The collapse had opened the king's route while driving him toward a confined passage. A rifle barrel appeared in an upper window above the eastern arch. Eleanor dragged the writing desk beneath her window, climbed onto it, and tore the heavy curtain from its hooks. She wrapped the fabric around one iron bar and twisted it using the leg of a chair. The wood cracked, but the bar shifted half an inch from the stone. Not enough. She twisted again until her palms split. Below, Nathaniel saw the rifle. He released the horse and threw himself across the king just as the shot struck the carriage rail. The bullet tore through Nathaniel's shoulder and spun him onto the paving stones. The horses plunged through the eastern arch without him. Eleanor pulled until the loosened bar tore free. She squeezed through the opening and dropped onto the sloping roof below. Tiles broke beneath her knees. She slid toward the edge, caught a rain gutter, and lowered herself onto the balcony of the council chamber. The queen stood inside, surrounded by panicked ministers. Eleanor struck the glass with the iron bar. The queen ordered the doors opened before the chamberlain could object. "The king is being driven into a second attack," Eleanor said. "Send cavalry through the north gate and clear the eastern passage. Order every soldier to remove his coat." A minister stared at her torn hands. "On whose authority?" "On the authority of the woman whose warning you ignored." The queen stepped forward. "Do it." Orders flew through the chamber. Mounted guards reached the king's carriage before it cleared the arch. They cut the traces, pulled His Majesty into a stone porter's lodge, and sealed the passage. The rifleman attempted to escape across the roof, but was captured with a Blackmere workshop drill in his pocket. By the time Eleanor reached the square, physicians were treating dozens of fallen soldiers. Some had received only shallow wounds. Others had been struck near the heart or throat. Thomas had discovered that cutting the thread beneath each button released it without activating the remaining needles. Eleanor moved from man to man, showing attendants where to slice the fabric. She saved a young ensign whose breathing had nearly stopped by identifying the green poison as a concentrated preparation of foxglove. The royal physicians administered charcoal and stimulants, while Eleanor recorded which buttons had discharged and which remained intact. Nathaniel lay beside the fountain, blood spreading beneath his shoulder. When Eleanor approached, he tried to sit. "Rose," he gasped. "My mother took her. You sent her." Pain crossed his face more sharply than the bullet wound. "I believed Ravenscroft was outside the conspiracy. You believed what protected your name." A royal physician knelt to examine him. but the king's chamberlain arrived first. By His Majesty's order, you are removed as Lord Steward and suspended from the Privy Council. Blackmere House and all its workshops are now property under royal seizure, pending an inquiry. Nathaniel closed his eyes. His title remained, but the influence he had sacrificed Eleanor to preserve had vanished in the square before hundreds of witnesses. The rifleman was dragged forward. Eleanor recognized him as one of Augusta's newly appointed footmen. "Who ordered the attack?" the chamberlain demanded. The man said nothing, but inside his coat, Thomas found a railway coach receipt, a map of the Ravenscroft estate, and a physician's certificate declaring Rose Blackmere dead from sudden fever. The certificate had already been signed. Only the date remained blank. Eleanor looked toward the western road. Augusta had not taken Rose to Ravenscroft for protection. She intended to erase the child who had seen the winding key in her room and blame Eleanor's poisoned mechanisms for her death. A cavalry officer approached. "Ravenscroft is 4 hours away in daylight." Eleanor examined the darkening sky. "Lady Augusta knows the old post roads. She can reach it in 3. The officer called for fresh horses. Thomas unfolded the railway receipt found on the assassin. It showed that a train would leave the Ravenscroft station at midnight under a false name, bound for the coast. If Augusta reached that train with Rose, the child and the last living witness would disappear beyond the Crown's immediate reach. The palace clock struck 7. They had 5 hours. Eleanor refused the royal carriage. "The western road narrows beyond Hartley Wood," she told the cavalry officer. "A carriage will lose half an hour at the old toll bridge. You cannot ride 4 hours after climbing through a window. My daughter cannot wait for my comfort." Thomas selected 2 fresh horses from the palace stable. He sealed the black bobbin, the railway receipt, and the unsigned death certificate inside separate oilskin packets, then recorded each item in his evidence book before handing the book to the Queen's chamberlain. "If we lose what we carry," he said, "the Crown will still possess a record of where each object was found." Eleanor mounted with bandaged palms. Nathaniel watched from a physician's litter near the palace entrance. His wounded shoulder had been bound, and blood still marked his shirt beneath the dressing. "I am coming with you. You cannot hold a rein. I know Ravenscroft. So do I. I managed its winter accounts for 6 years, while your mother claimed the estate produced no income." He stared at her. "You managed them? The mill rents, the timber contracts, and the tenants' relief fund. My mother told me she covered the losses herself. Your mother transferred every profit into a private account, then sent the repair bills to Blackmere. I paid them from my workshop commissions because the tenants would otherwise have lost their roofs." Nathaniel looked toward Thomas. The goldsmith nodded. Her Grace sold 2 sapphires from her personal settlement to rebuild the Ravenscroft mill after the flood. Nathaniel's face became still. Eleanor had never told him. At first, she had believed protecting his pride was an act of love. Later, silence became habit. Augusta exploited that silence, presenting Eleanor's labour as interference and her caution as instability. Nathaniel tried to rise from the litter. Pain forced him back. "Take my signet," he said. "The estate guards will obey it." Eleanor looked at the ring he began pulling from his finger. That signet placed Rose inside a trapped room. His hand stopped. "You are right. The admission came without defence. It did not repair what he had done." "If you wish to help," Eleanor said, "tell me every entrance your mother could use without passing the front gate." Nathaniel described an abandoned hunting road ending at the old glass house. He also revealed a servant's tunnel connecting the dower house to a chapel beyond the estate wall. Eleanor listened, then gave her terms. "You will remain here and provide the Queen with every Blackmere seal, account, and private letter she requests. You will conceal nothing to preserve your father's reputation or your own." He looked at the officials surrounding him. "They may strip the estate from Rose. Your choices already placed her inheritance at risk. The truth is the only thing left that may save her life." After a long silence, Nathaniel removed his signet and handed it to the chamberlain. "All Blackmere records are open to the Crown. I have always loved you," Nathaniel said. Eleanor tightened the reins. "You loved the woman who repaired every consequence before it reached you. The moment I asked you to face one yourself, you called me guilty." Eleanor turned her horse west. She did not forgive him. She rode. The cavalry separated at Hartley Wood. 4 men continued along the main road to draw attention, while Eleanor, Thomas, and 2 officers took the overgrown hunting path. Night gathered between the trees. At 9:30, they reached the ruined glass house outside Ravenscroft. No lights showed in the main residence, but fresh carriage tracks crossed the mud and ended beside a side entrance. Eleanor dismounted. "She is here." Thomas examined the tracks. One carriage arrived. None departed. They entered the glass house through a broken panel. Dead vines hung from the iron ribs, and rainwater collected in cracked stone beds. Beneath an overturned planter, Eleanor found a child's blue ribbon. Rose had left it deliberately. "She remembered what I taught her," Eleanor whispered. Whenever Rose feared becoming lost in crowded markets, Eleanor told her to leave small things behind: a ribbon, a handkerchief, a thread from her cuff. Objects could speak when voices were silenced. A second ribbon lay at the entrance to the servants' tunnel. The cavalry officers went ahead. Eleanor followed with Thomas, carrying one shuttered lamp. The passage smelled of damp earth and lamp oil. Halfway beneath the chapel, they found a locked iron door. A man groaned behind it. The officers forced the lock. Mr. Bell, Augusta's former locksmith, lay bound inside the storage chamber. He had been missing since the workshop locks were replaced. Thomas cut the ropes. Bell's eyes widened when he recognized Eleanor. "She said you had ordered the duplicate keys." "Lady Augusta?" He nodded. "She brought me impressions bearing the Duke's approval. I made keys for the workshop, poison cabinet, jewel room, and carriage house. When I asked why the order lacked Mr. Harcourt's countersignature, she locked me here." "Did you make the pearl casings?" "No, but I altered the small lathe so it could cut them in 2 matching halves." "Who instructed you?" Bell pointed toward a leather portfolio on a chapel shelf. Inside lay a technical drawing of the false pearls. Augusta's instructions appeared in the margins, written in the angular hand Eleanor had seen on household orders for 11 years. At the bottom was a list of payments to Mary Cole, the dismissed craftsman, and the captured rifleman. Mary's name had been marked unreliable. Beside Rose's name appeared one word: witness. Thomas wrapped the portfolio in oilskin. Bell signed a statement describing where it had been found and how he had altered the lathe. One cavalry officer added his signature as an independent witness. For the first time, they possessed an evidence chain that did not depend solely upon Eleanor's word. A floorboard creaked above them. Eleanor shuttered the lamp. A child coughed inside the chapel. "Rose," she whispered. They climbed the narrow steps. Through a crack in the panel, Eleanor saw her daughter seated before the altar. Augusta stood behind her, with one hand upon the child's shoulder. A physician waited beside an open medical case. On the altar rested a pearl brooch and a prepared death certificate. Eleanor motioned for the officers to circle toward the side door. Before they could move, Rose looked directly at the hidden panel. "Mama left me 5 ribbons," she announced loudly. Augusta turned. There were only 4 ribbons along the route. Rose had warned her. The panel flew open from the other side. Augusta's footman dragged Eleanor and Thomas into the chapel before the cavalry officers could reach the side entrance. One officer was struck down. The other was forced to surrender when Augusta placed a narrow blade against Rose's throat. Thomas's oilskin packet fell onto the chapel floor. Augusta picked it up. She opened the portfolio and saw Bell's signed statement. For one brief instant, fear broke through her composure. Then she carried the packet to the altar candle. "You should have remained a disgraced wife," she told Eleanor. "Now, your daughter will watch your proof burn." The flame caught the corner of the first page. The portfolio burned quickly. Augusta held it over the altar candle until the signed statement curled into black fragments. Payment records, mechanical drawings, and Bell's account collapsed into ash before Eleanor's eyes. Thomas lunged forward. A footman struck him across the temple and forced him to his knees. "Stop!" Rose cried. Augusta dropped the final burning page onto the stone floor and crushed it beneath the silver tip of her cane. "There," she said, "your accusation has become smoke." Eleanor stared at the blackened scraps. The loss hurt, but she refused to let Augusta see despair. The evidence had been fragile from the moment they found it. Thomas's custody notes remained at the palace. Bell was still alive, and one cavalry officer had witnessed the discovery. Yet without the documents, Augusta could claim Bell had invented everything to escape punishment. The physician beside the altar lifted a small glass vial. Eleanor recognized him then. Dr. Silas Wren had attended the late Duke during his final illness. He had also certified Nathaniel's exhaustion whenever Augusta wanted her son kept away from estate business. The same man had likely drugged Nathaniel in the library and Mary inside the carriage. "What did you give Miss Finch?" Eleanor asked. Wren avoided her eyes. Augusta answered for him, "A sleeping draught." "And Mary Cole?" "A thief's misfortune." Rose looked between them, frightened, but listening. Eleanor kept her voice calm. "You cannot kill all of us and call it misfortune. I require only one death." Augusta placed the pearl brooch against Rose's dress. Its pin was unusually thick. Green liquid glistened inside the hollow point. When the royal officers arrive, they will find a grieving grandmother, a murdered child, and the child's mother holding the weapon produced in her own workshop. "You already prepared the certificate." "A precaution?" "No, a deadline. You intend to leave on the midnight train before anyone examines the body." Augusta smiled faintly. "You always were more intelligent than Nathaniel understood. That was your greatest advantage." "No, my greatest advantage was his need to believe that obedience could preserve his family." Eleanor glanced toward the side door. One cavalry officer lay unconscious. The second remained on his knees, beneath a footman's pistol. Bell was still inside the passage. If he had regained enough strength, he might reach the glass house and summon the riders waiting on the main road. Eleanor needed time. "Why Rose?" she asked. "Because she entered my room and took the winding key, because she heard Wren discussing the uniform shipment, and because as long as she remains Nathaniel's heir, Ravenscroft eventually passes beyond my control." The admission sounded complete. It was not proof. Augusta believed every witness in the chapel would soon be dead, discredited, or under her authority. Eleanor shifted one step closer to the altar. "Your son gave you Ravenscroft for life. You already control it. For life is not ownership." There it was. Not maternal protection, not family honor, but possession. Augusta had engineered an attack against the crown so that Blackmere would be disgraced, its private estates disputed, and Rose removed. Amid seizure and scandal, she intended to escape with converted jewels and forged transfer documents. Thomas raised his head. The Queen's pearls funded the escape. Augusta looked at him. "The true pearls were removed months ago during restoration," he continued. "The necklace returned today was entirely false." Wren's face tightened. Eleanor understood from that reaction that Thomas had guessed correctly. Augusta struck his wounded temple with her cane. Rose screamed. Eleanor caught Thomas before he fell. The cane's silver head twisted slightly beneath Augusta's grip. A fine line appeared around it. Not decoration, a hidden compartment. The black bobbin found in the carriage had come from the lathe station, but the winding key Rose discovered was too small to operate the pearl mechanisms directly. It must open or release something else. Something Augusta carried at all times. Eleanor looked away before the dowager noticed. Hoofbeats sounded outside. Augusta pressed the poisoned brooch against Rose's collar. Everyone will remain silent. The chapel doors opened. Nathaniel entered first. His wounded arm was strapped against his chest. Rain soaked his coat, and 2 royal officers stood behind him, with a magistrate and 6 cavalrymen. Eleanor felt no relief until their weapons were raised toward Augusta's servants. "Release Rose," Nathaniel said. Augusta's blade remained at the child's throat. "You cannot order me from my own estate. It is no longer yours." A flicker of alarm crossed her face. Nathaniel stepped into the chapel. "At 8 o'clock, I surrendered every private Blackmere record to the Crown. I also confessed that my father's final land orders were signed by you while he was incapable of consent, and that I concealed the fact after inheriting." Augusta stared at him. "You fool. Perhaps, but not your fool any longer." The confession would cost him more than office. Ravenscroft's transfer could be voided. Parliamentary allies would abandon him. Tenants might challenge leases, bearing invalid seals. The Blackmere inheritance would face years of litigation. He had destroyed the protection he once valued above his wife and child. But the sacrifice did not restore the evidence he had burned earlier, nor did it entitle him to Eleanor's trust. Augusta recovered quickly. "Then you have condemned your daughter to poverty." "No," Eleanor said. "You endangered her to obtain property that was never yours." Augusta turned the poisoned brooch toward Eleanor. The cavalry officers moved. "Take one more step, and Rose dies." Nathaniel stopped. Eleanor studied the silver head of Augusta's cane. The seam had closed again. Augusta's thumb rested upon a tiny engraved raven. A pressure catch. "Rose," Eleanor said softly, "do you remember the counting game?" Her daughter's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. 3 flowers on the curtain, 2 windows in the carriage, 1 ribbon in your pocket. Rose reached into her sleeve. Then she dropped suddenly to the floor. Eleanor threw the heavy chapel Bible at Augusta's wrist. The poisoned brooch flew sideways. Nathaniel struck Augusta's arm with his good hand, while the cavalry officers seized Wren and the footman. Rose crawled beneath the altar and into Eleanor's arms. Augusta was disarmed, but she did not appear defeated. The magistrate examined the ashes on the floor, then listened as she calmly reversed the story. She claimed Eleanor had invaded Ravenscroft with armed men, coerced Belle into preparing a false statement, and attempted to take Rose in defiance of Nathaniel's signed custody order. Dr. Wren insisted the vial contained only laudanum and that the brooch belonged to Eleanor. With the portfolio destroyed, every surviving fact could be disputed. At Augusta's request, servants and tenants gathered outside the chapel. Before them, she announced that the disgraced Duchess had brought royal soldiers to seize an elderly widow's home. Whispers of sympathy spread through the crowd. The magistrate refused to arrest Augusta without a formal hearing. He ordered all parties to appear before the Queen's commissioners at Blackmere House the following evening. Until then, Rose remained under royal protection. It was a victory, but not vindication. Augusta left the chapel between 2 guards, who treated her like a noble witness rather than a conspirator. Her silver cane struck the floor with each measured step. Tap, tap. Eleanor looked down at the crushed ashes. Near the candle lay a tiny crescent of black wax. The portfolio had been tied with cord, not sealed. The wax must have fallen from Augusta's cane when its silver head twisted open. Thomas picked it up with a cloth. Embedded in the wax was a curved shaving of brass. The precision lathe produced such shavings only when cutting the inner channel of the false pearls. The compartment inside Augusta's cane had carried something made in Eleanor's workshop. Perhaps duplicate keys, perhaps the missing winding tool, perhaps one of the mechanisms themselves. Augusta would empty it before the hearing if they searched her now. Eleanor needed her to bring the cane into a room full of witnesses and deny that it had ever entered the workshop. She looked toward the magistrate. "At tomorrow's hearing, Lady Augusta will insist she never possessed my tools or keys." "She has already said so. Then I will give her an opportunity to prove it." Thomas followed Eleanor's gaze to the silver cane disappearing through the chapel doors. "You know she will lie." "Yes." Eleanor closed her fingers around Rose's blue ribbon. "This time, I intend to decide exactly where she does it." Before Augusta left the chapel, Eleanor made one quiet request. She did not ask the magistrate to search the silver cane. A search would warn Augusta which object mattered and allow her to invent an explanation before the hearing. Instead, Eleanor asked that everything carried by every witness be preserved exactly as it was. The magistrate agreed. A royal officer slid Augusta's cane into a long canvas evidence sleeve, tied both ends, and pressed the magistrate's seal across the knots. Augusta protested that she could not walk without it, so she was provided a plain wooden staff from the chapel vestry. She never saw Thomas collect the black wax and brass shaving from the floor, nor did she see him seal them separately before 2 cavalry officers signed the custody record. By the following evening, the great hall of Blackmere House had become a royal tribunal. The Queen's commissioners sat beneath the family portraits. The magistrate occupied a lower table, with the surviving objects arranged before him: the broken pearl, the black bobbin, the unsigned death certificate, the poisoned brooch, the rifleman's railway receipt, and Augusta's sealed cane. Rose remained in an adjoining chamber, guarded by soldiers, answerable only to the Crown. Miss Finch stayed with her, while a physician selected by the Queen examined every meal before the child received it. Mary Cole rested upstairs, under similar protection. Mr. Bell sat beside Sir Thomas near the witness table. Eleanor entered without jewels or ducal insignia. Her torn hands were freshly bandaged, and the grey dress she wore had been borrowed from a palace attendant. Yet, when the room rose, it was not for Nathaniel. It was for her. Augusta attacked first. She told the commissioners that Eleanor had become obsessed with controlling Blackmere's household. According to her account, the Duchess resented losing authority. planted false pearls inside her own case, drugged a dismissed worker, and staged the danger in the music room so she could appear to rescue Rose. My daughter-in-law possesses the necessary knowledge, Augusta concluded. Every mechanism came from her workshop. Every apparent clue leads back to her. Dr. Wren confirmed that Eleanor understood poisons. He denied drugging Mary or Miss Finch. He claimed the medicines found in his case were ordinary treatments and suggested Mary had injured herself while constructing the devices. The captured rifleman then changed his statement. He insisted Eleanor had paid him to fire harmlessly above the king's carriage, creating panic without intending murder. One commissioner turned to Eleanor. 3 witnesses placed the scheme under your direction. How do you answer? By separating what they know from what they were told to say. Eleanor approached the evidence table. She began with the timeline. The Queen's necklace disappeared after 10 in the morning. Mary Cole was found in the Blackmere carriage shortly after noon. Her shoes were dry despite continuous rain, beginning before 11. The palace physician confirmed the weather and the condition of Mary's shoes. She therefore entered the carriage before the necklace was stolen. Eleanor continued. Someone placed an unconscious woman there in advance, then later added the necklace to create the appearance of an interrupted escape. Augusta lifted her chin. Or Mary had an accomplice. An accomplice who dressed her in my missing cloak, carried her into my husband's carriage, and placed a Blackmere workshop bobbin beneath her hand. Eleanor lifted the sealed packet containing the wooden bobbin. Eleanor placed the black bobbin before the commissioners. This was found beneath Mary's hand while she was still unconscious. Sir Thomas and the palace physician both witnessed its recovery. Thomas nodded. The thread came from the mechanical bench in the Blackmere workshop. And Mary never worked at that bench, Eleanor said. Someone placed the bobbin with her because they expected the court to mistake access for guilt, the same trick used against me. Eleanor then addressed access. The false pearls required the precision lathe. Lady Augusta dismissed the only craftsman authorized to operate it. The workshop lock was replaced 3 weeks ago, after my key ceased to be the only one. Mr. Bell, the locksmith, faced the commissioners. Lady Augusta ordered duplicate keys to the workshop and poison cabinet. When I questioned her authority, she imprisoned me beneath the Ravenscroft chapel. Augusta called him a thief, Bell answered. Then explain why your cane contains one of the keys I made. Nathaniel was called next. He stood with one arm in a sling. I approved replacement of the workshop lock because my mother told me it had failed, he said. I did not authorize duplicate keys. I did, however, give her authority over the household and dismiss Lady Eleanor's objections without examination. He did not attempt to defend himself. He authenticated the custody order, sending Rose to Ravenscroft, and admitted destroying the wax-sealed message before it could be tested. My choices gave Lady Augusta access and damaged evidence that might have cleared my wife. Augusta stared at her son with open contempt. Eleanor felt no satisfaction. His truth was necessary, but it arrived after soldiers had fallen and Rose had faced a poisoned blade. The commissioners then heard the medical trail. The palace physician testified that Mary and Miss Finch displayed the same constricted pupils and slowed breathing. Residue recovered from Wren's vial matched the substance found on cloth inside the Blackmere carriage. Wren claimed Eleanor had placed it there. Thomas produced his evidence book. The vial was removed from Dr. Wren's locked case at Ravenscroft. 2 officers witnessed its recovery before the Duchess entered the chapel. Wren's certainty faltered. Eleanor turned to the finances. The genuine royal pearls had been removed gradually during scheduled restorations. Augusta's private account showed payments from a foreign jeweller corresponding to each missing stone. The amounts were concealed as rent from Ravenscroft's abandoned mill. Eleanor knew the mill produced nothing because she had personally paid to preserve it after the flood. The railway receipt proved someone intended to leave for the coast at midnight. The blank death certificate would have removed Rose as a witness and placed Ravenscroft's disputed property under Augusta's control. Finally, Eleanor addressed the knowledge no innocent person should possess. She faced Augusta. When the first mechanism opened in the palace gallery, you called it one of my devices before Sir Thomas had examined it. Everyone knew it came from your workshop. No, everyone knew only that a pearl had ticked. Augusta's eyes narrowed. You later claimed Mary had operated the lathe before her dismissal. Mary never operated it. Her work was polishing. Only the person who reassigned my craftsman would know which station produced the casings. That proves nothing. Then answer one question. How many casings were manufactured? Augusta paused. Thomas had mentioned 12 in Eleanor's prison room, with only one guard present. The full number had never been announced publicly. I cannot know. Dr. Wren? He shook his head. The rifleman? The man looked down. Eleanor placed 3 sealed envelopes before the commissioners. Each contained a separate workshop inventory prepared by Thomas, Bell, and the Royal Guards. All recorded 12 missing casings. 1 was broken in the gallery. 2 remained in my velvet case. 9 entered ceremonial uniforms. A commissioner counted the recovered mechanisms. Only 11 are present. 1 remains missing, Eleanor said. She turned toward the long canvas sleeve. Lady Augusta, is that your cane? Yes. Did it ever enter my workshop? No. Did you open its silver head during the events at Ravenscroft? It does not open. Have you ever stored a key, tool, pearl casing, or winding mechanism inside it? Augusta's answer came clearly. Never. The magistrate displayed the intact seals on both ends of the sleeve. The 2 officers who had secured it at the chapel confirmed that it had remained continuously in royal custody. Thomas placed the crescent of black wax and its embedded brass shaving beside the cane. The brass bears parallel grooves, he explained. If they match the damaged cutting tooth on Lady Eleanor's lathe, the shaving could only have been produced while the false pearls were being manufactured. And if the missing 12th casing is inside the cane, one commissioner asked, then Lady Augusta has just denied knowledge that only its owner could possess. The magistrate broke the first seal. No one in the hall moved. He untied the canvas, drew out the silver cane, and placed it before Augusta. Eleanor pointed to the engraved raven beneath its handle, pressed the left wing, then turned the head twice. For the first time, Augusta lost all colour. The magistrate pressed the raven. A hidden catch clicked. The silver head began to turn. The silver head came away from Augusta's cane. Inside the hollow shaft lay 3 objects wrapped in black thread. A duplicate workshop key, the tiny winding tool Rose had taken from Augusta's room, and a pearl casing no larger than a child's thumbnail. The 12th mechanism. A breath seemed to leave the entire hall at once. The magistrate did not touch the objects. He called Sir Thomas forward and ordered him to remove them with steel tongs. Augusta found her voice. Eleanor placed them there at Ravenscroft. The cane was in your hand when we entered the chapel, one cavalry officer said. No one else touched it until I sealed it. The second officer confirmed the account. Thomas examined the final casing beside the broken tooth from Eleanor's lathe. The same broken tooth left the same scar inside every false pearl, he said. He turned the casing toward the commissioners. This one was made on Eleanor's machine and recovered from Lady Augusta's sealed cane. Mr. Bell examined the hidden winding tool. I made this under Lady Augusta's direction. She told me it opened a musical box. Rose's voice came from the side doorway. It opened Grandmamma's cane. Every head turned. The child stood between Miss Finch and a royal guard. Eleanor had wanted her spared from the hearing, but Rose had heard Augusta's final denial from the adjoining chamber. Augusta looked at her granddaughter. You misunderstand what you saw. No. Rose stepped closer to Eleanor. Dr. Wren put the green bottle inside the cane. Grandmamma wound the pearl and said the soldiers would fall before Papa understood. Wren surged from his chair. A guard forced him back down. The commissioners examined the winding tool, the duplicate key, and the final casing. The black thread surrounding them matched the bobbin recovered beneath Mary's hand. Graphite inside the cane matched lubricant collected from the lathe gears. The evidence no longer depended upon a confession. It connected workshop, carriage, uniforms, Ravenscroft, and Augusta herself. Eleanor addressed the hall. The genuine pearls were removed during scheduled restorations and sold through a foreign jeweller. Their value funded Dr. Wren's poisons, the altered uniforms, and the midnight escape. She placed the unsigned death certificate beside the railway receipt. Mary discovered the hollow casings and was drugged. When Rose took the winding key, she became a second witness. Augusta, therefore, needed both of them silenced. The Queen's Commissioner studied Nathaniel's custody order, and the Duke delivered the child to Ravenscroft. He did, Eleanor said. Nathaniel did not look away. Augusta turned on her son. Everything I did preserved what your weakness would have lost. You attempted to murder my daughter. I secured the succession. By removing my heir? by freeing Blackmere from Eleanor's blood. The contempt in her answer revealed the motive beneath the scheme. Augusta had never accepted a duchess descended from a jeweler. She wanted Rose declared dead, Eleanor condemned for regicide, and Nathaniel left without a lawful heir he could protect. Once Blackmere collapsed beneath scandal, Augusta intended to flee with the stolen pearls and private funds. Wren had supplied drugs and poisons in exchange for passage abroad. The rifleman and 2 dismissed servants had been paid to create panic around the king. They believed the attack would merely disgrace Nathaniel and force the crown to seize Blackmere. Augusta had concealed the lethal needles from them. The commissioners ordered Augusta, Wren, and the rifleman taken into royal custody. Bell received protection in exchange for his testimony. Mary Cole was cleared of theft and promised compensation for her unlawful dismissal and injuries. Augusta resisted only when a guard took her cane. "That belongs to me." Eleanor met her eyes. "No, it belongs with the evidence." The dowager was led from the hall without the silver staff that had announced her authority for years. The royal judgment came 3 weeks later. Augusta's dower income was placed under seizure to repay the crown, the poisoned soldiers, and the craftsman she had falsely accused. She and Dr. Wren were committed for trial on charges of conspiracy, attempted murder, theft from the crown, and falsification of medical records. The rifleman's cooperation spared him the harshest sentence, but not imprisonment. The Queen publicly declared Eleanor innocent before the same courtiers who had watched her searched. The royal collection was returned to Eleanor's supervision, not as a privilege derived from her marriage, but as a salaried appointment under the crown. Her workshop was transferred into a trust beyond Nathaniel's control. Its profits would support Rose, Mary, the injured guards, and the craftsmen dismissed by Augusta. Ravenscroft was removed from the dowager settlement and placed in trust for its tenants until the disputed deeds could be resolved. Rose remained with Eleanor. Only after her reputation, work, income, and custody had been secured did Eleanor agree to meet Nathaniel. He came to her workshop without a title, escort, or signet ring. The room had been restored, tools hung in their proper positions, and the precision lathe stood beneath a royal seal. Eleanor sat at her father's old bench, repairing the clasp of a modest necklace. Nathaniel remained near the door. "The Queen has accepted my resignation from the Privy Council," he said. "I have also surrendered management of the private estates to independent trustees." Eleanor continued working. "I made a public statement, withdrawing every accusation against you," he added. "I named what I did. I refused the weighing of the pearls. I burned the message. I signed the declaration. I sent Rose to Ravenscroft after you warned me. You remembered all of it. I will remember it for the rest of my life." He placed a document on the bench. It guaranteed Eleanor a separate residence, independent maintenance, unrestricted custody of Rose, and control of her personal settlement. Nathaniel had agreed not to enter her home without invitation. "I am not asking you to forgive me," he said. "I am asking you to accept what should never have required your suffering." Eleanor read every clause. Then she signed. Nathaniel watched the pen leave the paper. "Is there any possibility that, in time—" "No." The word was quiet. It was also final. "You did not lose me when your mother's scheme was exposed," Eleanor said. "You lost me when the truth was placed in your hand, and you burned it." Pain crossed his face, but he did not argue. He bowed and walked to the door. Rose waited in the courtyard beside a carriage, bearing Eleanor's new royal insignia. Thomas had packed her tools for their journey to the Crown's restored jewel house, where she would train 3 young women as apprentices. Eleanor closed the velvet case on the repaired necklace. At the royal gallery, guards had removed her gloves, while her husband stood silent. Now, she drew on a new pair herself, one finger at a time. She took Rose's hand, entered the waiting carriage, and gave the order to depart. Behind them, the gates of Blackmere House remained open. Eleanor did not look back.